Last week, Alpha 3.24 delivered tons of bug fixes to the Evocati, but it still has some major issues preventing it from being released to the wider PTU. Inside Star Citizen showed off the new cargo hauling missions and the new Blockade Runner event that still needs to be tested. Last week, we received an update that the progress tracker is still not ready, again, and finally SCL returned with a second part on missions. With Alpha 3.24 still seemingly out of reach, with no Wave 1 in sight, many are beginning to wonder if CIG will be able to release 2 patches this summer. If you love to discuss the game's future and enjoy seeing all of the great sim gear and peripherals on the market, smash that like button and consider supporting the channel by clicking the subscribe button so you can stay informed. Welcome back to Last Week in the Verse. Last week, CIG released 3 patches to the Evocati, which mostly consisted of bug fixes and minor gameplay updates for Alpha 3.24. First up, they made more aerodynamic tuning updates to ships such as the Gladiator, Hawk, Hornet F7C, and Origin 300i for improved yaw control and atmospheric flight. They focused on several critical bug fixes, including resolving desync issues with rest stop hangar doors, fixing vehicle engine failures after docking, and correcting personal hangar audio overlaps. I'm honestly glad to hear that they've been working on fixing desync issues, and I'm hoping that they continue this trend and also extend it to various other aspects of the game. Other notable fixes address cargo hauling mission reputations, ASOP fleet manager focus issues, and personal hangar collisions. Additionally, the update includes fixes for freight elevator interactions, mobiGlass chat functionality, and mission completions for bounty hunters. On the technical side, the patch addresses 2 client crashes, 3 server crashes, and 2 hybrid service crashes, ensuring better game stability and performance. I'd argue that when 4.0 is released, they should begin focusing more on stability and performance to get into a better state and allow Star Citizen to move into the realm of being a beta. But as they haven't talked about this in a while, I'm honestly not sure what their overall plans are. If you would like to see a future video discussing potential features between the 4.0 and 1.0 patches, leave a comment below. On Thursday, they delivered the second patch of the week with the ASOP and elevator UIs receiving a polish pass, with the devs making adjustments to font size and style for personalized text fields. This improves the overall readability and user experience. In addition, they continued focusing on making significant changes to the atmospheric flight tuning that they applied to nearly every ship in the game. This update fine-tunes atmospheric flight speeds and yaw capabilities, with more iterations expected as we continue through the PTU phases. These changes are critical in getting atmospheric flight using master modes into a better state. There were often complaints that some ships had a ton of issues when flying in atmosphere. Now, the extremely important part for me is seeing how atmospheric flight will feel once flight control surfaces are in, hopefully in 4.0, and also what other changes they will make to master modes to further develop it. Several important bug fixes were implemented as well. Reloading weapons from backpacks should now work more consistently, whereas before they had many issues with this feature. They also had issues with ATC assigning players to occupied hangars, and the ability to interact with ships from someone else's hangar were also resolved. Furthermore, fixes were made for non-functional ship engines after docking, missing cargo grids and scrapyard freight elevators, and empty transaction confirmation windows at freight kiosks. Also, persistent hangars should no longer spawn with disabled vis portals, transit, physics, or collision. They resolved issues with the cargo hauling mission markers that will now correctly hide and reappear based on the player location. And lastly, they fixed more technical issues. Now, the big news that wasn't even in the patch notes and instead was discussed in the testing chat is that they disabled all mission progression. This allowed Evocati testers to see all 140 of the cargo hauling missions that were extremely varied. They also added new commodities like ice and silicon. Now, when I read that there are 140 cargo hauling missions alone, it honestly kind of surprised me. I didn't expect that many missions, and it actually makes me think that the mission refactor in 4.0 might actually bring a ton of new changes and even a ton of new missions in Stanton. This would be a pretty incredible change, and I'm hoping that we see it soon. On Friday, their final patch for the week made updates to the cargo loading times that have been revamped based on the box size rather than per SCU. This will offer a more realistic and efficient loading experience and hopefully will no longer result in a C2 taking 5 hours to unload. Instead, this will take more along the lines of 5 to 23 minutes, depending on the size of the cargo container. They also continued with further atmospheric flight tunings. For bug fixes, they addressed a major issue with the law system, allowing players to be able to press charges against other players within the Stanton system. They addressed missing paint bucket icons for liveries in the vehicle loadout manager that have finally been restored, which will improve the UI functionality and user experience. These fixes, along with ongoing improvements, aim to provide a smoother and more enjoyable gameplay experience. Now, unfortunately, I've been hearing that throughout all of these patches, many issues still remain in 3.24 that are preventing its release to the wider PTU. One of the major issues is that kiosks in the hangars aren't working properly. This means that players are unable to perform essential tasks like managing cargo and ship components, which severely hinders gameplay. There's also a game-breaking bug with equipping armor, where when you attempt to put on your armor, it not only causes the item to stick to your hands, but it also frequently leads to a 30k, which disrupts the game entirely. Another significant issue is the unreliable behavior of the ATC when it comes to opening hangars. Players are finding themselves stuck outside of hangars or unable to land, which is frustrating and time-consuming. These issues collectively make it difficult to thoroughly test the new patch, as they prevent players from engaging in core gameplay activities. Due to these persistent problems, many players are only playing each patch for a short time before giving up. The current state of the game makes it challenging to test the new updates effectively, leading to a cycle of waiting for the next patch in the hopes of improvements. It's clear that these issues need to be addressed before the patch can be released to the next wave of testers, and even more importantly, released to the live servers. As far as what their plans are for this week, we'll have to see what other fixes they can provide. But as of right now, this patch is looking to be similar to 3.23 based on its current testing cycle, leaving myself and many others to question 4.0's release window. I'm hoping that CIG makes an official announcement on 4.0 and provides the community with an update on its Evocati release. Now, they did mention that since there was no roadmap update last week, as far as they're concerned, that means 4.0 is still on track sometime within the next 77 days. At this point, fingers crossed. Inside Star Citizen returned this week with them first showing off the Blockade Runner dynamic event that focuses on cargo hauling and combat gameplay. This event is meant to replace the Ninetales lockdown, but in a more enjoyable and engaging way. Now the cargo looting portion of the mission is PvE focused, where you'll go out and gather the necessary resources from ships. This is similar in some ways to Xenothreat, which they referenced in the video. But there will also be a combat element where ships will be attacking the station and cargo haulers, and they'll have to break through the blockade, obviously with some help, and they'll have to unload the cargo into the freight elevators, where it will count towards the progress of the event. Now there will also be an unlawful mission for players to accept that will introduce a PvP element to this, where players will be able to pick a side and assist the criminals with preventing the ships from landing at the station. Next, they moved on to discuss the new cargo hauling missions and how they'll work. So let's again talk about the mission flow of some of the types of missions you'll encounter. One of the mission types will have you land at an outpost on a moon or planet and have you interact with the freight elevator where you'll request the cargo. You'll load your cargo into the ship and take it to a landing zone such as Lorville, where you may then be sent to another location until the mission is complete. Another type of location will have you pick up cargo at a single location like a station in orbit, load the specified cargo, and deliver it to a Lagrange point station. In the final type of mission that you'll encounter, you'll fly to a single location to pick up the cargo and deliver it to multiple locations. Now the cargo hauling missions weren't the only thing that they talked about, but they also discussed how these missions and their new effort versus reward system will be their first static implementation of StarSim, which will begin testing the economy, where they can then use that data to move on to creating a more dynamic setup, where each location will begin having their own needs and wants. This will be the beginning of seeing supply and demand within the verse, and give players a reason to trade commodities, mine certain materials, and even salvage ships and sell the resources to various landing zones, stations, and outposts. Now, unfortunately, there is no information as to when we may see this, but hopefully, we'll at least begin to see what this will look like at CitizenCon, and that it's implemented shortly after. If we could see even just a manually adjusted economy by the end of the year, it would be a major improvement. Finally, SCL talked about how the missions themselves don't state which size boxes will be used in the mission currently, but they're working on getting that added in the future to further allow players to plan these new cargo missions more effectively. They then answered one of the questions on if we could use our own commodities that we found or bought, and they stated that we would not be able to. Instead, when we accept the mission, we'll need to fly to the location and pick up the cargo containers as they're mission specific. They also went on to say that they are working on more missions where you will be able to gather resources your own way via mining, salvaging, hunting, or even farming and turn those in. I think resource gathering missions will be a really great way for players to group up together, as I could see having a mining operation go on and cargo ships can bring empty prospector or mole bags to the mining ships. Then the mining crews can swap out the full bags and give them to the cargo runners, and the cargo ships can turn it in at the mission locations while the mining crews continue to pull missions and collect more resources. They talked about how they want to make small and medium cargo ships more relevant to allow players that own those ships to be able to do more of the cargo hauling missions, rather than just wanting the largest cargo ships, and also how they're working on balancing the payout amount of missions to reward progression. So as you gain more reputation with certain NPCs and orgs, you make more the higher you are. Now, a lot of this is them using the effort versus reward tool, and a lot of these values have changed often as they try to make mission rewards worthwhile. Jared went on to ask the mission team why they are making this balance change now with the new missions, and why not wait to release the changes until all of the missions are rebalanced the same way, and the answer they gave was amazing. Essentially, the longer they waited to make this change, the larger their backlog would get, which was the old way of doing things. Their intention going forward is that as they add new missions they're working on, they will implement the EVR system with them. This will prevent them from having to do a lot of extra work by going back to even more missions in the future to add EVR, and only have to rework the much older missions in the backlog. Overall, this is a much better approach than previously, and one I'm on board with. Jared also discussed that they also have intentions going forward to avoid wipes between patches. Now, some of the community had issues with this, but I think it's not all that bad. I'll have to wait and see before I ultimately draw my own conclusions. With the many bugs and technical fixes going into 3.24, CIG is working hard to get the next patch in a better state. Now, there's still no update on when we can see this be released to the wider community on the PTU, but they seem to be making decent progress. While I and many others have concerns that 4.0's release window is rapidly closing, we'll have to wait and see what happens after 3.24 goes live. For the next couple of weeks, it will be imperative for CIG to deliver more bug fixes, better stability, and get Alpha 3.24 to more waves in order for them to move on to 4.0, which is the next big push. As much as it feels pointless to hope that they deliver on their promises from last year's CitizenCon, to deliver all of the features they talked about wanting to deliver in a year, I believe that they should stick to the deadline they set for themselves in many ways, and truly believe that if they hit the mark and deliver all of the features in 4.0, including some that may not be on the list, the game will be better for it, and many players will be busy playing it for quite a while. I, for one, will be happier once they release 4.0 with everything on the roadmap. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about 4.0's release window, as I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you're interested in one of the best updates to a gameplay loop, then check out this video on the future bounty hunting. Fly safe, pilots, and we'll see you in the next video. Havoc out.